Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the nonprofits. It turns out there haven't been any new reported cases of avian flu in the last 4 months. Kelley, can you tell us more about why that is?
Well, Eli, there might actually be a big reason for that because since the current administration has taken over leadership of the government and cut funding to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, commonly known as the CDC, their communication network that warns Americans about health hazards and disease outbreaks has apparently been shut down. They normally disperse daily, weekly, and quarterly bulletins, and the CDC's communication staff was responsible for keeping the health of Americans safe through alerts about disease outbreaks. But no communications have been issued since last March. In the meantime, the country has experienced outbreaks of measles, salmonella, listeria, and hepatitis, all over the country. Now, former and current CDC employees say this lack of communication is actually putting American lives at risk and needs to be rectified immediately. But it seems as though, at least right now, we have no way to tell if there's an epidemic breaking out. This story was broke from by the NPR by Elijah Nouvelage on May 21st, 2025.
What an amazing first name that person has. So, Kelley, you mentioned this in your intro. So, I want to ask you the first thing that I thought of when I saw this was like, oh, this was budget cuts, right? Obviously, this was certainly the doing of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, which actually, by some analyses, has actually cost the taxpayers upwards of $100 billion, which means it cost about like 5 to 7% of what it was promising to save. So, my point being, expand on this part of your opening thoughts if you care to. How do you think those budget cuts play into this?
Well, I'm pretty sure they have cut into a lot of it. They've obviously affected more than the CDC. And looking at some of the recent polling, it seems like there might be a little buyer's remorse going on for it. As you mentioned, it has cost us a lot of money in the costs that were accrued because of the budget cuts. And there's also we're building up legal costs too because of the challenges to some of these cuts. Right. So it's been really it's been a big effect on many different aspects of the government. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied. Now, this is a very important part of our government, the CDC. No matter what all you conspiracy theorists say, this is our first line of defense against any modern plague. I mean, if the bubonic plague starts tomorrow, we're not going to know. And it seems like we've been cut up. They've completely been cut off from warning us about it. I know a lot of the cuts were because of some of the leadership. Also, this wasn't done with a scalpel, as I mentioned before we started the show. And Eli, I'm going to let you say what you thought it was. Mm-hmm. I was saying it was more like chainsaw, like the normal thing, but. I used to joke that the brainworm starved to death, but now I'm not so sure it was really a joke, honestly.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those things where the importance of these warning systems, these newsletters they were sending out on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, quarterly basis to like warn like healthcare professionals about like this is the sort of like what's going on in healthcare and what you need to be prepared for in your area because this is what those reports aren't getting out, and that's so crucial to maintaining and protecting public health that and controlling diseases, which is the titular function of the CDC. So yeah, I'm with you. It definitely is problematic, and shifting to AJ for a minute, I did kind of take a position like yours at first, Kelley, where I was like, yeah, this is certainly budget cuts. But then when I go to look into it, I landed somewhere closer to where I think AJ was kind of thinking too. So just sort of like to just kind of share your thoughts, the way Kelley did, just kind of open-endedly. Do you think this is a budget thing, or do you think there's a more direct or just a different cause for the silence from the CDC?
I do have to agree a little bit that it could be partly due to the budget cuts, but I also think that from the start of the current administration, nearly everyone involved in communications at the CDC was laid off. Okay, like the media communication, the people that provided records to the public, the entire division of digital media was also told that the department would be eliminated, and they fired web developers, graphic designers, social media staffers, all of them at the same time. Anyone that was left was locked out of the main social media accounts. So I don't know. I think partly budget cuts, partly they fucked up. But see, the CDC used to post on Facebook daily, sometimes more than once a day. But since March, it's been like radio silence, absolutely like nothing. One of the last posts on their Facebook page is RFK Jr. claiming that the Department of Health and Human Services is going to streamline communication. The CDC used to be able to publish and share these findings in a timely manner because they were not being micromanaged by the Department of Health and Human Services. But now it's like everything has to go through them. The staff says that it has caused a backlog of several months worth of data that should have already been published on their social media, on their websites, on their email newsletters, as well as some direct communications to American physicians, right? Like researchers' labs. It's just a mess. So I think that maybe it started as a budget cut, but it just got into such a tangled mess that nobody can even tell now what it's about.
Yeah, and I agree with it. That's basically where I landed too. And I agree with you up to the point where like it was basically immediately after the inauguration at the beginning of this year. That's when things started to change and like communication started, specifically started to change. But as I looked into it, it was Dr. Dorothy Fink, and she was the interim secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services before RFK Jr.'s confirmation. So she was appointed by the incoming president on the day of his inauguration, which is standard practice for, each time there's a new president, they appoint, among other offices, an interim, secretary for this office. And Dr. Dorothy Fink was the appointee this year. So she made the order to halt all communications on January 21st of this year. And then, like you said, 2 months later, the Facebook makes their last 3 posts at the end of March, one of them being a video from RFK Jr. saying, we're going to streamline communication. So with that,
what they call that in 1984, doublespeak?
Basically, yeah. I mean, is that not exactly what it is?
That's what it is, right?
Right, and that's exactly what I'm getting at, because if they've, their most recent like public social posts, which is not their most recent communication because the website is still updating, not as regularly as it used to, but still updating. So with like all of these outward communications halting so that the incoming administration can review them, 2 months after she halts communications, they disappear completely. So can it even like be said that they're actually streamlining communication, or is that even what this is about, do you think, AJ?
Oh no. I don't think it's about streamlining communication, because you can do that while keeping your staff in the loop, right? And not firing pretty much all of your staff. You can do that while keeping American scientists informed so that they can make decisions that keep the American public safe, which is the main purpose of the CDC. So to see this blatant disregard for science, you can clearly see it right there. Now, this really makes me upset and frustrated, but I'm not really surprised by it in a sense. And the reason is because we saw this in the first term of the current administration. I don't know if you guys remember around 2017, like about a year after he took office, the March for Science took place all over the United States. It was like a huge protest, like millions of people, that included a large amount of scientists that were a vital part of the organizing of the protest. They were members of the movement. I mean, you rarely ever see that. You rarely see scientists like getting involved that deeply. And it started because of the disregard for science, like we are seeing right now. It was like something that hasn't happened since then in such a massive way. I was the director for the Houston chapter, and we had like 15,000 people come out and march. And the reason for that was because Houston has the largest medical center in the world. So the things that are happening in the CDC, the effects of this lack of communication can be devastating for institutions, major institutions that contain this large amount of hospitals, clinics, laboratories, all of this research. And obviously it affects the communities that they serve.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted.
Thanks, guys. I think that was really well said, honestly. And like we've all discussed, like, but among the three of us, like sciences before. We're all science-like folk here. Kelley, chief among us, being published in a journal, right? So, just with that being the case, talking on to the point AJ made about like this just public and systemic, you could say, disregard for science and just wonder and learning and knowledge. Would you have anything that you want to, kind of speak onto that from your perspective?
Oh, I would love to speak on that. And I think that this is, I mean, like the current administration reaction to science, using this as a really good example, is setting the pace for this kind of reaction from the rest of our society. And I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but I do remember during the first term, one of the people who the organizations that did stand up to our current president was the CDC during the COVID outbreak. So, I mean, like right when he comes in, day one, he starts tearing it up. That doesn't seem, it doesn't actually seem like a conspiracy, does it? It seems like normal behavior for this person to me. But, I don't know if I could say that or not. But I think there's been another effect that goes down the line within the CDC besides what we've talked about. And that is a lot of people were saying that they've been putting in these bulletins, but they have to be approved by the upper echelons, and they're not approving these bulletins. So these people, knowing they're not going to be approved, aren't even submitting them anymore. And that's a real problem, is that these people who are trying to tear apart the CDC are actually getting the few people who are left at the CDC to not do their job properly. I mean, they've just sucked the morale out of all the employees there, the employees that are left, right? And going back to the initial question of the lack of science and knowledge, science, yeah, and the interest in that, I in the last few years, I've seen a little bit more with the younger kids. Like I had a kid in here today in my store that was just awesome. I wanted to hug him. He was so curious. I had a young girl in yesterday that was amazing, talking about ultraviolet. She had to be like 10 years old, talking about ultraviolet light. And I was like, that's really cool. And I haven't really seen that much interest in science in a long time. And it's really heartening that science is right there in everybody's living room. As long as you've got a computer or a phone in your hand, science is right there. All of science is available to you. And that's freaking amazing. But unfortunately, there are people my age, a little bit younger than me, that are still stuck in the 90s, and they haven't realized that technology has moved forward. And those are the people that we're having to deal with today too. And then we always have that, I talk about it all the time, the Carlin problem. George Carlin said that average intelligence isn't that smart, and half the people are dumber than that. So there's always going to be these people that reject science, right? Because they just can't understand it. They don't get it, and it's out of their world. And that's all those people that know all that stuff. They're the elite, and I'm not the elite. Screw those guys.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. And that attitude is becoming more, or has been more prevalent since honestly, the turn of the century.
Yeah. I don't think I could have said that better. And the thing is, those people that you're talking about that are stuck in, this is just what I think, and that's just what I was taught. One of the most sinister things about this, I think, is that you have those people who demonstrably don't have expertise in any given field being granted what they perceive as unchecked authority over that field, that industry, that sector, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
And they're allowed to say, that doesn't sound right to me. And if their basis for thinking that doesn't sound right is either, I don't remember being taught that, either because they weren't paying attention or because they were never taught,
or just because, simply that don't sound right to me,
right? Or because that's not what the Bible says, or like, I feel like it's probably something that's not a natural woodland
that's not
creature.
What my gut tells me.
Exactly. If that's what their basis is, there's basically, if you first have to convince them that there may be something that they don't know, which for people who buy into the argument from authority, that's a difficult thing to do, and especially if they find merit, or if they use their position as a crutch to insist that they know best, which I think is a lot about what is similar to what we're seeing in a lot of context right now. And when you have others in authority endorsing that person, it just perpetuates this false impression that not only they can and should be trusted, but that they should not be questioned. And it makes me think of these like dynastic emperors or empires that were ruled by like the emotions and the opinions of their rulers, and your quality of life can change dramatically overnight based on who the most recent murderer is. Now, you can't say that all government is based on governing the governing party's personal opinions, but you can come to those personal opinions and those beliefs either through like science and evidence-based reasoning, or something more similar to like a hunch or a feeling or a misunderstanding, or like one of those methods that's just not that good for coming to like a truth-based conclusion. So with that being said, AJ, would you say that it is important to make that distinction between like an expert and an authority, and whether the opinion of one or the other has any more of a place in governance than the other, or would you do away with personal opinions altogether?
Unfortunately, I don't think that the majority of people come to their opinion based on evidence, but rather than like feelings, or like, hey, I just think, or hey, I just got this idea and that's my opinion and that's that. And they don't even look into the actual evidence or the science of it. And for that reason,
I got to giggle when you said, because I thought of that. My dad always voted Republican, and that was good enough for him, so I'm going to vote Republican. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that made me laugh a little bit, because that's right along with what you were saying, right?
Yeah, but that's exactly and but it shouldn't really matter what your personal opinion is, or like whatever your belief, especially of the people running enormous departments that are in control of the entire country, like the health department. And the current person that is serving this department is there to serve the public, not to serve a personal agenda. And they should listen to the scientists that are doing the science, that are doing the thing that they've spent years being trained to do. Okay, that they use the scientific method to come to all of these consensus, and not necessarily just use their argument of authority to be like, hey, just because it's one scientist, he's right. No, like they are actually using the scientific consensus as a whole. So what I'm trying to say is like, the part that blows my mind about this is that we really know who is behind this, and we know why he is doing it. But the CDC's communication shouldn't be just about vaccines or all of this stuff that this person is focused on. That's just such a tiny part of what they do. They deal with things like outbreaks of measles, like we've had here in Texas, salmonella, listeria, or hepatitis A and hepatitis C, food safety. They inform us about disease prevention, and we currently have over 100 million Americans suffering from different chronic illnesses like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, all types of cancers, which include childhood cancers. So the posts that they used to share on their social media weren't about any type of controversial topics. Right? They were like information for pregnant women on how to take care of their bodies and how to take care of their unborn babies, which, you know, it's one of the things that the conservatives claim to care so much about, or, you know, the reminders about cancer screenings. So the CDC is there to give recommendations from experts in their specific fields about different topics of health. So, but, you know, I guess that's how much the American government values life. But don't worry, they're going to keep pushing the ban on abortion so that American women can forcibly give birth to more babies that then will grow up to be adults that they can tell to fuck right off.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up pretty nicely there. That's essentially what it is. They taking care of the society doesn't seem to be an important goal. It's just about creating more taxpayers, more workers, more something. Who knows?
Believers, more believers.
Yeah, more believers, more Christians, more soldiers in God's army, or, you know, whoever needs an army.
Yeah,
that's the one.
I like the way they justify it too. It was like, well, people voted for us, so this is must be what they want. Mm-hmm. They all knew we were idiots, and they voted for us. So when we act like idiots, that must be what they want, right?
Well, we're not idiots, and neither are you, viewers. So you should do what smart people do and check out more nonprofits